Welcome to the Work Trends podcast from Talent Culture. I'm your host, Megan Ambiro. Every week, I interview interesting people who are reimagining work. And be sure to check out our Work Trends Twitter chat events calendar located at talentculture.com on the podcast page. Welcome to the Talent Culture Work Trends podcast. I'm your host, Megan, and we are discussing today how to maximize workplace gatherings to make changes stick. First, we all know it's important to understand that change doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's not as simple as just implementing a new idea or strategy and expecting it to stick right away. There needs to be support from all levels of the organization, as well as buy-in and commitment from employees themselves. Over the years, it has become some form of common knowledge that organizational change fails 70% of the time. Today's guest points to a culprit: poor gatherings, whether they're official meetings, team events, or even just impromptu get-togethers. Gatherings provide a unique opportunity to build support for change. Unpacking this idea with me today is Lindsay Kaplan. Lindsay Kaplan is a screenwriter turned organizational psychologist who helps HR and business leaders script their change efforts to the effect they want. Her forthcoming book, The Gathering Effect, is based on her research and consulting practice. So welcome, Lindsay. How are you?
Hey, Megan, I'm great. Thanks so much for having me.
And where are you today?
I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area.
What's not to love about that?
Not much, at least in my opinion.
Well, let's get on with this, shall we?
Sounds great.
So tell us, what is the deal with gathering effect? Tell us more about it.
Sure. So first, maybe I'll define gathering just to give us all this common language. So I define gathering as bringing people together to match a message with a moment, to create an effect. And we'll talk about the effects in just a second. But I think in our companies and, for those of us in HR, we're very familiar with gatherings. They're happening all the time, whether they're virtual or in person or hybrid. There are things like town halls, all hands, offsites, retreats, conferences, classes, new hire orientations. They're a tool that we use inside companies to communicate change and also help employees do something differently. So that's just sort of what gatherings are. But in terms of the gathering effect, basically, they're a common tool that we use. And just like a hammer, we can use them for different purposes. And there's 4 different effects that we can create with our gatherings, depending on the choices that we're making.
Well, Lindsay, that makes a whole lot of sense to me. I want to hear more about the gathering and the effect together.
Absolutely. So, we mentioned gathering is this very common tool that we use to spark movement or change. And we all have this tool, but we can create different effects depending on how we use it, just like a hammer. So part of what I teach companies to do is to start with the effect that they want versus the content that they want to share. And that may feel a little different to folks, but it really is a big strategic difference that can really help our change and our gathering stick. So there's 4 different effects that we can create. And the same gathering can create, again, each of these different effects depending on our choices. So there's 4. One is compliance. I think we're all very familiar with the compliance gathering. They tend to be, compliance trainings or these check the box activities where we're simply told what to do to take an action. A second would be informing. Ensure information is internalized. A lot of training classes probably are created with this effect in mind. A third is to entertain. So we want to bring about a sense of delight. Maybe our sales kickoffs or, our town halls where we have a DJ come or an exciting guest speaker may feel entertaining to folks. And then a fourth is engagement. And engagement, this effect is meant to create ownership, buy-in, generate new thinking, perhaps some behavior change. And although this is the effect that I think most people want, it may not be the effect that we always need. It may be the most misunderstood effect. So what I teach people to do is to make different choices to define and diagnose and then adjust their gathering and their change effort for the effect that they want.
So you have a lot of experience with this. What are some of the common characteristics that lead to gatherings that last and then changes that stick?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's helpful maybe to introduce a metaphor or two here. So my husband is a big gardener, and, he can buy a bunch of flowers, but if he doesn't have the right soil or conditions or water or light, then the flowers are not going to bloom. Very similar for our change efforts in our gathering. I think we tend to think it's all about the content, it's all about the flowers, but really the key to success in both our gatherings and our change efforts is the conditions that we're creating that help it support and help it stick. And my research over the past 15 years or so has shown me that, again, gatherings and change have the same characteristics when they stick. And I'll go through these 5 sort of quickly if I can. The first is to see and recognize your audience or your employees. So do we know the needs of the people that we have in the room? Do we know what they care about, what their burning platform is, what's at stake for them? Often as leaders, we probably know, but maybe we don't have a sense of what our employees care about. The second is to make it just for them. So how can we make our gathering specific to that one group in that one moment in time? Even if I'm a leader and I've given the same speech or the same town hall content 100 times, how do I make it feel like it's made just for that one group? Often that comes just from listening to who's in the room. The third is to give our employees ownership. We know the organizational development adage of involvement leads towards commitment, ownership leads towards commitment. The same thing here. So many gatherings keep our employees passive, sort of just consuming content. How can we give them a role to play or a way to contribute so they feel ownership over the gathering and the change? A fourth is to connect to a universal concept. So, I was watching the Tony Awards, the theater awards this weekend, and when folks accepted their award, they said, this is a show about humanity. This is a show about faith. And that's just a way to connect what you care about to something broader that we can all nod our head about. Change efforts have the same characteristic. The fifth characteristic is to allow agency and choice. And this is something I tend to really help people with, which is to increase our employees' status. Even if our gathering or our change effort is mandatory, how do we give people that choice or sense that they have control over their own destiny in this change effort? So those are the 5 conditions.
I mean, the 5 conditions sound super awesome. My first question is going to be, what are some of the common pitfalls we're seeing around gathering and change?
So one is, how can we shift our employees from passive to active? That's a key difference between a compliance versus an engaging gathering. So we talked about giving people ownership. Maybe it's putting a question on the screen that gives people thinking about the content before the gathering starts. So, hey, we have a class on feedback. What's a challenge that you've seen related to this topic in the past month? Or what's a critical incident that you want to impact today? It's a small choice that we can make that helps people feel seen, recognized, makes it personal to them, and pulls them into the material. A second is to add space and time for folks to debrief and digest the content. So we talked about one of the pitfalls is stuffing the suitcase. A quick fix for this is really just to pause, especially after a content-heavy section. Maybe it's in your town hall, or maybe it's in a training class or a new hire orientation, and just ask people to think about what's one thing you're taking away, turn to somebody else and share what's coming to mind. This relinquishes control to your employees, helps it feel made just for them, gives them ownership, helps them feel seen and recognized, all those conditions that we mentioned. And again, helps them retain and remember the material because they're putting it in their own words.
I love it. Sometimes we overthink it, right?
Yeah. And again, I think these choices that I recommend and some of the work I help clients do, these are small choices that have big impacts.
You say gatherings are culture on display. Can you explain what that means?
Sure. Especially in a remote environment or even hybrid environment, anytime we log into an all-company meeting or a town hall or a training class or these synchronous events, they're rare, right? And these are high stakes moments, often at an important point in an employee's journey where they're viewing our culture. They're hearing our leadership talk. They're together with all employees. And so if we're not in the office every day, I think as many of us no longer are, these are really important moments to both build culture and show culture. And so employees are paying attention to what you're saying and how you're saying it. So that's why I say that.
I think that's huge. And I hope if you're out there listening in the Work Trends community, know that your culture is being seen. You're being heard. And I think that's so powerful right now. I have to ask you this. What happened in your life that led you to become interested in this topic to begin with?
What happened? Well, when I look back on the past 15 years or so, the common thread has always been about gathering. I don't think I realized that until a few years years ago, but my career spans 3 disciplines who all gather: entertainment, education, and business. These are folks who are marrying a message with a moment to create an effect. Entertainers, professors, business leaders. And I sort of realized one day while I was head of learning and development for a tech company that this is a tool that everybody wanted me to create, but it was very misunderstood and often misused. And that led me down a path to help illuminate this tool and help it be used more effectively.
I love that, because ultimately it's about becoming more human. It's about simplifying, but it's also about being mindful about what's at stake.
For sure. And again, a lot of these characteristics I talk about and the model that I share, they apply across all of these gatherings and are a symptom and is a way to understand change more effectively. So if we understand it for one gathering, we can do it for all, so we're not repeating it every single time. And I hope that that's really helpful for people to have this skill set and tool belt.
I want to talk for a minute about the future of gatherings in this, I'm going to go off on a limb and say post-pandemic worlds. I don't think we're really there yet, but I'm being aspirational. What are we looking forward to next?
Well, I think for a lot of employees, there's a higher bar now when it comes to gathering. We didn't have it for a while, or we had an overdose on Zoom gathering, and maybe it illuminated what we really need, which is to feel that our time is useful and that we feel visible and valued. So what's next is I hope that has given us awareness of the opportunity to do better. And it's also revealed what we're really gathering for, which is not information. It's connection.
So Lindsay Kaplan, thank you for stopping by. How can we reach you moving forward?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Folks can find me at my website, which is gatheringeffect.com, and got lots of resources to help people maximize their gatherings to make change stick.
Thanks for listening to the Work Trends Podcast, your favorite source for all that's new and exciting in the world of work. If you love what we do here, let us know. Share our podcast. And don't forget, tune into our next episode. I'm looking forward to catching up with you next time. Thanks to listening to Work Trends from Talent Culture. Join us every Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern for a live Twitter chat with our podcast guest. To learn more about guests featured on today's show, visit the show notes for this episode at talentculture.com and help us spread the word. Subscribe to Work Trends wherever you listen to podcasts. Leave us a rating, review in iTunes. Share Work Trends with your coworkers, your friends. Look forward to it. See you next time.